The Frieza arc is arguably the most iconic arc of the Dragon Ball franchise, for many important and excellent aspects of it. The struggle for the Dragon Balls being between three parties made for one of the more complex conflicts of the series, the multifaceted nature of Vegeta that would become a key part of his growth in future arcs rearing its head, Freeza being easily one of the greatest villains of the franchise with his contrasting mannerisms and how far he pushes Goku's ideals, and, of course, Goku not just acknowledging his Saiyan nature, but embracing and balancing it perfectly with the payoff of the series' most iconic transformation, with the first appearance of the Super Saiyan for the audience. Though this transformation is iconic for both its simplistic yet effective method of conveying great power, and its narrative purpose as a representation of both this balance of nature and nurture, or yin and yang too, with the personification of how Goku has been brought beyond his limit of tolerance, many may not realize how heavily it's rooted in Buddhist iconography and ideals. This is quite obvious if aware of the Buddhist idea that a being who enlightens to their Buddha nature shines like gold and shakes a world of 10 directions. And it becomes impossible not to see the similarities to the Super Saiyan clad in golden hair and aura, with this first instance being on a planet shaken from damage that gradually shakes further as the level of ki in the fight increases and Goku subsequently becomes more used to the state, even if the damage was due to Frieza's making. Now, it is worth pointing out this wasn't the first golden transformation in Shonen, with Seiya's donning of the Sagittarius cloth in Saint Seiya, as well as that series' character Vertigo Shaka, along with the power system and philosophies of it drawn partially from Buddhist ideals. Though the Greek mythology motif makes it apparent the idea of gold representing a high level draws from the colours of Olympian medals, and makes the Buddhist tie to this idea not as strong as with the Super Saiyan. It's more than simply an artistic motif for Goku's transformation, as, when looking back both at prior events in the arc and forward to information provided outside the manga, that we can see how Buddhist ideas tie into this plot point. One issue the Western fanbase sometimes have with the arc's power escalation is in Goku's activation of the Saiyan trait after the fight with Ginyu, bringing his ki to greater levels than Vegeta received from greater injuries. This idea comes from looking at the trait purely from a biological standpoint, not that this isn't important with it being a genetic trait, as I'll get into soon, despite the story still being based on Eastern spiritual principles throughout its entirety, despite the more Western science fiction leans it has in the Saiyan, Frieza and Cell arcs. Even before the idea of Goku being an alien was a spark in Toriyama's mind, the in and out of universe explanation for Goku surpassing his peers and mentors so naturally in the early arcs would be rooted in how his upbringing made him in line with the natural law of the Tao, and thereby offered him greater enlightenment quality, or Ushin, which continues even into later story arcs, such as using such concepts to focus on mastering the Super Saiyan state, and his method of Shugyo providing greater benefits than Vegeta and Trunks' flawed decision to simply acquire enhanced but flawed versions of the transformation. It can't be overlooked how much the Shugyo Goku performed on the way to Namek helped his ki cultivation and refinement either, rather than simply being an amped up version of Kaio's training as some incorrectly label it as. Take into account that other characters with the ability to sense ki in this arc, such as Kuririn, still need to be in the vicinity of great levels of ki to accurately gauge them, and even with a technique that connected him to all life on the planet with the Genki Dama, Goku after his Shugyo with Kaio still didn't have the most precise gauging of ki, when Vegeta's power was a mystery to him until they fought. Upon landing on Namek though, he could pinpoint ki in a more refined manner, as well as enlightened to the ability to read the memories of others on contact, similar to what Muten Roshi displayed with Namu. Vegeta's constant berating of Goku not having the prerequisites to be a Super Saiyan due to his gentle nature and broad-mindedness are proven wrong with such things as his attachment to Kuririn, aiding in attaining the form, whereas Vegeta failed. But such a difference in Goku having greater Buddha nature and refinement of it helped with his ki cultivation both before and upon gaining the form. Some may decry, but Vegeta got the form in the next arc and he's not really in line with Buddha nature, and forget an important change to his character after his revival. To summarise and avoid this tangentially becoming a Vegeta character analysis, the revelation that the low-class Kakaroto became the legendary Super Saiyan and defeated the seemingly indestructible Frieza completely changed his worldview. With Vegeta being someone who finds validation in being stronger than others, he wishes to surpass Super Saiyan Goku, to the point of wanting the latter to be revived when soon dead, rather than simply destroying or conquering Earth and its inhabitants when having the strength to do so. Though the manga doesn't provide many details as to Vegeta's process in attaining the form later, him having felt rage internally towards himself rather than externally being angry at Frieza or Goku, when the latter option would never have the depth of how Goku felt at Kuririn's death, was important for the sudden enlightenment brought forth mainly by rage, that is, Super Saiyan. In a very Buddhist manner, but with differing motivations and emotions, Vegeta looks inwards rather than outwards in order to enlighten in a manner he couldn't do on Namek. This also makes it apparent why Goku not only brought his ki to greater levels, but how a newer reveal ties into all this. Some of you may be familiar with Toriyama bringing up the concept of S-cells in interviews as a post-hoc explanation for things such as why Goten and the present version of Trunks were so strong and easily attained to the Super Saiyan form. It is controversial, with some viewing it as what could be called the Rowling approach of explaining important plot points after the story is concluded, or saying it demystifies things, as with the midichlorians in Star Wars, both of which are flawed when the latter shows many as still not understanding the nature of midichlorians that was spelled out clearly over 20 years ago. See this video of actually needing an explanation so this video doesn't get off topic. And the former being incorrect, as such things were always present during the events of the manga. To cover the topic of placing spiritual concepts in scientific boxes, I honestly find it laughable anyone could consider this a critique of the idea, when not only is it for a concept that requires one to have Saiyan genetics, but the manga already did this with one of the most infamous concepts in battle powers provide a numerical measurement of ki. It also goes under the pretense that a universe with both spiritual mysticism and highly technological sci-fi shouldn't have ideas like this intertwined, despite some of the most hailed science fiction authors fully accepting the idea that magic and highly advanced scientific concepts are interchangeable terms depending on the perspective, which the manga makes very apparent in the early chapters. As for the idea that it's a purely post-hoc explanation, not simply clarification on what was already there, those that have been paying attention to the segment on Buddhism and Goku's Ushin will already be aware why that isn't so. Toriyama's explanation includes the idea that the S-cells necessary for a Saiyan to achieve the form are more likely to cultivate in those with more peaceful spirits, and this is impossible to unsee with the comparison of Goku and Vegeta's mindset on Namek. By Goku having gone through the nurturing to acquire what can be considered a greater Buddha nature, such is synonymous with him cultivating more S-cells, and helps bind the transformation as a narrative display of characters enlightening to greater truths and internal improvement, as we see with Vegeta, or Gohan having gained greater perspective of his inner rage and the value of life by the time during and after attaining it. It's also important to note that the requirements for attaining it weren't fully known to characters that clearly aren't omniscient, such as with Vegeta breaking the pure heart misconception early into the Cell arc. So it clearly was a concept that had room for explanation that didn't infringe on what came before. Furthermore, the evidence of Tibetan monks being able to change things such as their metabolism, or even their brainwaves, ties this aspect of Buddhism and biology together. And this acknowledgement of the series as a Buddho-Taoist narrative ties everything together perfectly. On the subject of post-hoc explanations tying consistently with what had come before, the video on the Cell arc will go over how the time travel in the series is handled a lot better than some may realise.